Welcome back to my channel, where real story takes its time. Let's get into it.
At dinner, my parents humiliated me for not owning a penthouse like my sister. They all laughed until I revealed she's been renting it from me for years. The table fell silent. My parents froze, and my sister's smile disappeared instantly. The champagne flutes caught the candlelight as my parents raised them high, toasting to another one of Laura's achievements. I sat across from her at the mahogany dining table in their estate, watching my older sister's perfect smile grow wider with each compliment thrown her way. The private dining room they'd reserved at the Grand Oak was exactly the kind of place where my family liked to celebrate Laura's successes, which seemed to happen every other month. To Laura, my father announced, his voice booming across the table for closing the Westfield account. $30 million, my brilliant daughter. Everyone clinked glasses. My brother-in-law, James, beamed beside Laura, his hand resting possessively on the back of her chair. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a silk napkin, overcome with pride. I lifted my glass and took a sip, the bubbles feeling like tiny needles against my tongue. "Thank you, Daddy," Laura said, her voice dripping with false modesty. It was challenging, but I never back down from a challenge. My mother reached across the table and squeezed Laura's hand. "You've always been so driven, sweetheart. So focused. We're incredibly proud of you." The statement hung in the air like smoke. The unspoken comparison didn't need to be voiced. I was 32 years old, 2 years younger than Laura, and according to my family's metric of success, I had nothing to show for it. No high-powered career at a prestigious firm, no wealthy husband, no sprawling penthouse in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. "Olivia," my father said, turning his attention to me for the first time that evening. "How's the bookstore treating you?" The way he said bookstore made it sound like I was running a lemonade stand. I owned 3 independent bookstores across the city, each one carefully curated and profitable. But to my father, anything that wasn't corporate law or investment banking was barely worth mentioning. "Business is good," I replied evenly. "We're expanding our rare books collection, and the cafe, at the downtown location, just won an award for—" "That's nice," he interrupted, already losing interest. His gaze shifted back to Laura. "Speaking of downtown, how's that penthouse of yours?" "Still the crown jewel of Morrison Tower." Laura's eyes sparkled. "Oh, it's wonderful. We just had the interior designer redo the living room. Italian marble custom furniture from Switzerland. The view alone is worth every penny." "Every penny," my mother echoed, sighing wistfully. "I tell everyone about it. My daughter lives in the most sought-after building in the entire city. Do you know the waiting list for Morrison Tower is 3 years long?" "5 years," Laura corrected smugly. "They updated it last month." James nodded, playing his supporting role perfectly. "We were very fortunate to get in when we did. Right place, right time." My mother's gaze drifted to me, and I could see the calculation behind her eyes. The comparison was coming. I braced myself. "Olivia, where are you living these days?" "Still in that little apartment in Riverside." The neighborhood name came out like an insult. Riverside wasn't fashionable or trendy. It was a quiet area with tree-lined streets and families who'd lived there for generations. My apartment was a renovated loft above one of my bookstores, spacious and filled with light, but it wasn't a status symbol. "Yes," I said simply. "Still renting, I assume?" my father asked, cutting into his steak with more force than necessary. "I own the building, actually." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "The building with a bookstore, yes. But you live above a shop, darling. It's not quite the same as owning real property." Laura leaned forward, her smile sharpening. "Mom's right. I mean, it's great that you have your little business, but living above it. That's basically like never leaving work. James and I have complete separation between our professional and personal lives. When we come home to Morrison Tower, we leave all the stress behind. The penthouse is our sanctuary," James added perfectly on cue. My father refilled his wine glass, already on his third pour of the evening. "You know, Olivia, if you'd gone to law school like we suggested, you could have had a career like Laura's. You'd be able to afford something better than a studio apartment in a second-rate neighborhood." "It's a loft," I corrected quietly. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1,600 square feet. "Still," my mother said, her tone pitying, "it's not Morrison Tower." The server arrived with the next course, giving me a momentary reprieve. As plates of sea bass were distributed around the table, I noticed Laura whispering something to James. They both glanced at me and laughed softly. My mother joined in without even knowing what was funny. What I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Nothing, Laura said innocently. I was just telling James about how you used to play real estate agent when we were kids. Remember you'd draw little floor plans and pretend to sell houses. It's sweet that you still have that entrepreneurial spirit, even if it's just bookstores. The condescension was suffocating. My father chuckled, shaking his head. She spent hours with those drawings. We thought she'd become an architect or a developer. Instead, she sells paperbacks. Hardcovers too, I said flatly. My mother patted my hand in what she probably thought was a comforting gesture. There's no shame in a modest life, sweetheart. Not everyone can be exceptional. Some people are meant to live simply. Laura raised her glass again. To modest lives and simple pleasures. James and my parents joined the toast, their laughter echoing off the walls. I didn't lift my glass. Something inside me snapped. Years of being dismissed, patronized, and compared unfavorably to my sister crystallized into a single moment of absolute clarity. I was done being quiet. I was done being the family disappointment. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through their amusement. I need to tell you something about Laura's penthouse. The laughter died. Laura's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained fixed in place. What about it? I met her gaze directly. You don't own it. The silence that followed was profound. My father set down his fork. My mother's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. James looked confused, glancing between Laura and me. The private dining room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in. Of course we own it, Laura said, her voice tight. We bought it 4 years ago. No, I said calmly. You've been renting it for 4 years. From me. My mother laughed nervously. Olivia, what are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward the table. I've been receiving monthly rental payments of $12,000 from Laura and James for the past 48 months. That's $576,000 total, not including the security deposit. The lease agreement we signed in late 2019 is still active. My father leaned forward, his face reddening. This is ridiculous. Laura, tell her she's wrong. But Laura wasn't saying anything. The color had drained from her face. James was staring at her with an expression of dawning horror. You can verify it easily. I continued pulling up the property records on my phone. Morrison Tower Unit 4802. Registered owner Olivia Catherine Bennett. Purchased in 2019 for $2.3 million. Current estimated value $3.1 million. I slid my phone across the table to my father. He picked it up with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the screen. My mother leaned over his shoulder, reading the same information. The truth was there in black and white, irrefutable and documented. This can't be right, my mother whispered. It's completely right, I said. I bought the penthouse with money I'd been saving and investing since I was 23. My bookstores were already profitable, and I'd made some smart investments in real estate and tech stocks. When Morrison Tower first opened, I bought 3 units, the penthouse, a 2-bedroom on the 15th floor, and a studio on the 8th. I rent them all out. Laura finally found her voice. You're lying. I looked at her steadily. Call the building management. Ask them who owns your unit. Ask them where they send the annual tax documents. Ask them who approved your request to repaint the bedroom last year. James turned to Laura, his voice strained. Is this true? Have we been renting this whole time? I've been paying half of what I thought was a mortgage for 4 years. We can discuss this later, Laura hissed. No, my father said, his voice hard. We'll discuss it now. Laura, did you tell us you owned that penthouse when you were actually renting it? My father demanded. Laura's perfect composure cracked. It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said. 4 years ago, you came to me in private. You said you wanted to live in Morrison Tower but couldn't afford to buy. You begged me not to tell Mom and Dad because you didn't want them to know you couldn't afford it on your own. You asked me to let you rent the penthouse and promised you'd eventually buy it from me when your finances improved. My mother gasped. Laura, you told us you bought it with your signing bonus from the firm. She did receive a signing bonus, I said. $75,000. The penthouse was worth $2.3 million. The math doesn't work. James pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You told me your parents had helped with the down payment. You said we owned it. We might as well own it, Laura said desperately. We've been paying for it for 4 years. You've been paying rent, I corrected, which is not the same as paying a mortgage. You don't build equity with rent. You're not the legal owner. You're a tenant. My father's face had gone from red to purple. Do you have any idea how many people we've told about your penthouse? My colleagues, our friends, everyone at the club. I've been bragging for years that my daughter owns a penthouse in Morrison Tower. I do own a penthouse in Morrison Tower, Laura snapped. It just happens to technically belong to Olivia. Technically, my mother's voice rose to a shriek. Either you own something or you don't. The other diners in the restaurant were starting to notice our table. A manager appeared at the edge of the private dining room, concern written across his face. My father waved him away with an angry gesture. Why didn't you just tell us the truth? My mother asked Laura, her voice breaking. There's no shame in renting. Isn't there? Laura shot back. You just spent the entire dinner mocking Olivia for living in a rented apartment. Except she doesn't even rent. She owns multiple properties while I've been pretending to be something I'm not. The admission hung in the air, like a confession. James stood up, tossing his napkin onto his plate. I need some air. He walked out of the dining room without looking back. James, Laura called after him, but he didn't stop. She turned on me, her eyes blazing with fury and humiliation. You did this on purpose. You waited for the perfect moment to embarrass me. You embarrassed yourself, I replied. I just corrected the record. If you'd been honest from the beginning, none of this would have happened. My mother was crying now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. How could you lie to us for 4 years, every holiday? Every family gathering, you let us believe something that wasn't true. Because I knew this would happen, Laura shouted. I knew you'd look at me differently if you knew I hadn't made it on my own. I knew I'd become the disappointment instead of the golden child. My father stood up abruptly. We need to go home. Now. This dinner is over. He threw several $100 bills on the table without counting them and stormed toward the exit. My mother followed, still crying. Laura grabbed her purse and coat, shooting me a look of pure hatred, before hurrying after them. I sat alone at the table, surrounded by half-eaten meals and abandoned champagne flutes. The weight of what had just happened settled over me like a heavy blanket. Part of me wanted to feel guilty, to chase after them and take it all back. But another part, the part that had been quietly absorbing their criticism for years, felt nothing but relief. The truth was finally out there, exposed under the chandelier light of an expensive restaurant, and there was no taking it back. A waiter approached tentatively. Miss, can I get you anything else? Just the check, I said softly, and maybe a glass of water. He nodded and disappeared. I looked at my phone again, scrolling through the property records I'd pulled up. Morrison Tower Unit 4802. My name on every legal document. The proof had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to surface, or maybe the wrong moment depending on how you looked at it. My phone buzzed continuously with incoming messages. I opened the thread from Laura first. Beyond her initial accusation, she'd sent a dozen more texts. You have no right to humiliate me like that. James won't even look at me. Do you have any idea what you've done to my marriage? Mom is having a panic attack in the car. I'll never forgive you for this. Each message dripped with desperation and fury. I switched to my mother's messages, which were more controlled, but equally distressed. Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high. I hope you're satisfied. We need to discuss this as a family privately. How could you ambush your sister like this? Call me when you're ready to act like an adult. My father hadn't texted. He wasn't the texting type. When he was angry, he preferred to deliver his disappointment in person, with the full weight of his presence behind every word. I'd be hearing from him soon enough. The waiter returned with my water and the check. I paid with my credit card, the same one I used for all my business expenses. The same one that covered the mortgage payments on 3 properties in Morrison Tower, 2 commercial spaces that housed my bookstores, and the renovated warehouse I'd recently purchased, with plans to open a 4th location. My portfolio was extensive, carefully built over nearly a decade of strategic planning and disciplined saving. Every property I owned had been chosen strategically researched, thoroughly purchased, at the right moment in the market. I'd started small with a modest inheritance from my grandmother that my parents had dismissed as insignificant. $20,000. They'd suggested I use it for a down payment on a sensible sedan. Instead, I'd invested it in my first bookstore, a failing shop in a neglected neighborhood that was just beginning to show signs of gentrification. I'd been 23, fresh out of college, with a degree in English literature that my parents had barely tolerated. They'd wanted me to go to law school. Laura had gone to law school. Why couldn't I be more like Laura? The irony wasn't lost on me now. That first bookstore had been my laboratory. I'd worked 16-hour days learning everything about retail inventory management, customer service, and community building. I'd hosted author readings in the evenings, created a loyalty program, partnered with local schools and book clubs. Within 2 years, the shop was profitable. Within 3 years, I'd saved enough for a down payment on the building itself. My parents had never asked about the details. They'd attended the grand reopening once, stayed for 20 minutes, made polite comments, and left early to attend a fundraiser for Laura's law firm. My mother had suggested the bookstore was charming in that tone people use when they mean quaint, but ultimately insignificant. The second bookstore had come 3 years later in a trendy arts district that was attracting young professionals. This one had a cafe attached serving artisanal coffee and locally baked pastries. It became a gathering place, a community hub. The profit margins were better than the first location. I'd hired a manager for the original shop and split my time between the two. By then, I'd started investing in real estate more seriously. The money from the bookstores was steady, but the real wealth came from property appreciation. I'd studied the market, obsessively reading everything I could about urban development patterns, neighborhood revitalization, and investment strategies. I'd attended seminars, worked with other investors, learned from their successes and failures. When Morrison Tower was announced, I'd recognized the opportunity immediately. The building was going up in a neighborhood that was transforming, backed by developers with a track record of successful projects. The pre-sale prices were high, but not unreasonable for investors willing to bet on the area's future. By this point, I had substantial equity in my properties and strong cash flow from both bookstores. I'd done the math run, the projections, consulted with a financial advisor who specialized in real estate investment. I'd purchased 3 units during the pre-sale in 2018, the Penthouse, a mid-level 2-bedroom, and a small studio. The total investment had been significant, requiring me to leverage my existing properties and structure the financing carefully. But the numbers made sense. The rental income would cover the mortgage payments with room to spare, and the properties would appreciate significantly if the neighborhood developed as projected. It had been the biggest risk of my life. My financial advisor had cautioned me about over-leveraging, about putting too many eggs in one basket. But I trusted my research and my instincts, and I'd been right. Morrison Tower had become exactly what the developers promised, the most prestigious address in the city, with a waiting list that stretched for years. Laura had come to me 6 months after the building opened. She'd been working at her firm for a year, earning a good salary, but not enough to buy into Morrison Tower's market. She wanted the prestige, the address, the ability to tell people she lived there. She begged me to rent her the penthouse, promising it would be temporary, swearing she'd eventually have enough saved to buy it from me. I'd agreed because she was my sister. Because despite everything, despite the constant comparisons and the subtle put-downs, I'd still wanted her approval. I thought that helping her would somehow bridge the gap between us, would make her see me as an equal instead of a lesser version of what she'd become. Instead, she turned my generosity into a weapon against me. Every family gathering where she'd bragged about her penthouse had been a small betrayal. Every time my parents had praised her success while dismissing my achievements, she'd remained silent, letting them believe a lie that elevated her at my expense. The waiter brought back my credit card. "Have a good evening, miss." "You too," I managed, though. The evening was already beyond redemption. I gathered my things and walked through the restaurant, aware of the curious glances from other diners. Our table's drama hadn't been entirely private. People had noticed the raised voices, the sudden exodus. Let them wonder. Let them gossip. The truth was out now, and gossip couldn't hurt me. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed face. I'd taken a rideshare to the restaurant, not wanting to worry about parking or drinking. Now I pulled out my phone and requested another car. While I waited, I scrolled through more messages. My Aunt Paula, my mother's sister, had somehow already heard about the dinner. "Your mother just called me in tears." "What happened?" "She says you and Laura had a terrible fight." A former college roommate who was friends with James's sister texted next. "Is it true about Laura's apartment? Jessica just texted me something crazy." The news was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. By tomorrow, everyone in my parents' social circle would know that Laura's penthouse wasn't hers, that she'd been renting from her supposedly unsuccessful younger sister, that the family's golden child had feet of clay. My rideshare arrived, a quiet sedan with a driver who thankfully didn't try to make conversation. I gave him the address and leaned back against the seat, closing my eyes. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. My phone rang. My father. I stared at his name on the screen, watching it ring through to voicemail. Then it rang again immediately. And again. On the fourth call, I answered. "Dad, what were you thinking?" His voice was strained, barely controlled. "Humiliating your sister in public like that. Destroying her marriage. Is that what you wanted?" "I wanted to stop being treated like a failure," I said quietly. "I wanted you all to stop acting like I'm some kind of charity case when I've been more successful than any of you realized. So you decided to destroy Laura to prove a point." "I didn't destroy Laura. She destroyed herself by lying for 4 years. I just told the truth." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "You could have told us privately. You could have pulled us aside after dinner, shown us the documents, handled it with some dignity. Instead, you turned it into a spectacle." "Like you've all been making a spectacle of me for years," I shot back. "Every dinner, every holiday, every family event, the jokes about my little bookstores, the comments about my apartment, the constant comparisons to Laura's supposedly superior life. That was fine though, right? That was just family dynamics." Silence on the other end, then quieter. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I pressed. "When was the last time you asked about my business with genuine interest? When did you last acknowledge that I might actually be successful in my own right? You've been so busy worshiping Laura's achievements that you never bothered to notice I had any." "We noticed," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "We knew you were doing well." "Did you?" I asked. "Because tonight was the first time any of you seemed to realize I own property. The first time you understood that my little bookstores are actually a thriving business. You thought I was barely scraping by, living above the shop because I couldn't afford anything better." The silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing, could imagine him in his study with a glass of scotch, trying to process this new reality, where his disappointing younger daughter was actually more financially successful than his prized eldest. "Your mother is very upset," he said finally. "She's worried about Laura." "I'm sure she is. She's always worried about Laura." "That's not—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "We'll talk about this when everyone has calmed down. This isn't something we can resolve tonight." "No," I agreed. "It's not." He hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at my phone, feeling the complicated mix of emotions that came with standing up to your parents. Vindication and guilt, strength and uncertainty, all tangled together in a knot I couldn't unravel. When I got home, the building was quiet. The parking garage echoed with my footsteps as I walked to the elevator. My building was old by the city's standards, built in the 1920s and renovated in the early 2000s. When I bought it, the ground floor had housed a failing bookstore, and the upper floors had been divided into cramped, outdated apartments. I'd seen potential where others had seen only decay. The renovation had taken 8 months and required careful financial management. I'd worked alongside the contractors, learning about load-bearing walls and electrical systems and plumbing codes. I'd made decisions about every detail. The exposed brick walls, the original hardwood floors, refinished to their former glory. The industrial-style lighting that highlighted the building's bones while adding modern functionality. The bookstore had been completely reimagined. I'd knocked down walls to create an open, flowing space. Added the cafe in the back corner with its vintage espresso machine and mismatched comfortable chairs. Created a children's section with a reading nook and regular story hours. Installed floor-to-ceiling shelves built by a local craftsman who specialized in reclaimed wood. My apartment above took up the entire second floor. What had been 4 separate units became one expansive loft with soaring ceilings, original exposed beams, and windows that let in light from 3 directions. I kept the layout open, except for the 2 bedrooms and bathrooms, creating a space that felt both vast and intimate. My parents had visited exactly once shortly after I completed the renovation. They'd walk through, quickly making polite observations, clearly uncomfortable with the industrial aesthetic and the location. My mother had wrinkled her nose at the cafe below, worried about the smell of coffee seeping into my apartment. My father had questioned the wisdom of living where I worked, suggesting it would make it impossible to ever truly relax. Laura hadn't visited at all. She claimed to be too busy, her schedule too demanding. But I knew the real reason. My loft, for all its space and character, couldn't compete with Morrison Tower's prestige. It didn't have a doorman or a concierge. It didn't have a gym or a rooftop pool. It was just a renovated space above a bookstore in an unfashionable neighborhood, and that wasn't worth her time. Inside my loft, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, overlooking the quiet street below. My space wasn't flashy or impressive by my family's standards, but it was mine. Every book on the shelves, every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall reflected my choices and my taste. There were no lies here, no pretense. The next morning, I woke to 47 missed calls and countless text messages. My father wanted to meet for breakfast. My mother insisted we needed to talk immediately. Laura alternated between rage and pleading, demanding I fix what I'd broken. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I went downstairs to my bookstore and opened for business. Customers came in throughout the day browsing the shelves, asking for recommendations, settling into the cafe with their laptops and lattes. This was real. This was solid. This was success that didn't require anyone's approval but my own. Around noon, James showed up. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept. I met him in the cafe section away from the other customers. I need to understand something, he said without preamble. Did Laura know from the beginning that she was renting from you? Yes, I said honestly. She came to me specifically because she knew I owned the property. She asked me not to tell anyone, especially our parents. She said it would be temporary until she could afford to buy it. James rubbed his face with both hands. She told me her parents had loaned her money for the down payment. She showed me documents, closing papers. Everything looked legitimate. They probably were legitimate rental agreements, I said. She just passed them off as mortgage documents. He laughed bitterly. I've been telling my family we owned it. My parents visited last Christmas. They were so impressed. They thought we'd really made it. He paused, looking at me with confusion. Why did you wait so long to say something? I didn't plan to say anything at all, I admitted. But last night, listening to them tear me apart while praising Laura for something I actually accomplished, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm tired of being treated like the failure when I've been successful on my own terms. James nodded slowly. I get it. For what it's worth, I think what you've built is impressive. These bookstores, your investments, the way you've handled yourself. Laura talks about you like you're barely scraping by, but that's clearly not true. It never was true, I said, but it fit the narrative they wanted. Laura is the successful one. I'm the creative dreamer who never quite made it. Except I did make it. I just did it quietly. James left shortly after saying he needed time to think. I didn't know if he and Laura would survive this revelation. Their marriage had been built partly on a shared image of success, and that image had turned out to be a hologram. For 3 days, I ignored my family's attempts to contact me. Then on the 4th day, my father showed up at the bookstore. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper. He asked if we could talk privately. I led him to the small office in the back. Your mother is devastated, he began. I'm not apologizing, I said before he could continue. I didn't do anything wrong. Laura lied to all of you for 4 years. I simply told the truth. He sighed heavily. I know. We've had several difficult conversations with your sister. She's admitted everything. The lies, the deception, the way she manipulated the situation to maintain appearances. He hesitated. And we owe you an apology. The words were clearly difficult for him. We've been unfair to you, not just last week, but for years. We measured your success against Laura's achievements without recognizing that you were building something substantial in your own way. I waited, saying nothing. I looked into your businesses, he continued. Really looked into them. Your accountant is a colleague's daughter. I asked her about you professionally speaking. She told me your 3 bookstores generate significant revenue. She mentioned your real estate portfolio, your investment accounts. Olivia, you're worth more than Laura and James combined. This isn't about money, I said quietly. I know. It's about respect, and we failed to give you that. He looked around the office, taking in the organized chaos of inventory lists and author event schedules. You built this from nothing? Laura had every advantage we could give her, and she still couldn't make it without lying about her circumstances. You asked for nothing and accomplished everything. The apology felt strange, uncomfortable. I'd spent so long being the disappointment that I didn't know how to process being seen as successful by the man whose approval I'd stopped seeking years ago. Where do we go from here? I asked. I don't know, my father admitted. Your mother wants to have a family dinner, a real one where we actually talk honestly. Laura has something she wants to say to you. James has moved out temporarily. He's staying with his brother while they figure things out. I don't need Laura to say anything I told him. Her apology won't change what happened. The words she said, the way she treated me, that's all still real. You're right, but maybe we all need to start somewhere. He stood to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I should have said it years ago. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time staring at the wall. Vindication felt different than I'd imagined. Less satisfying, more complicated. I'd proven my point, but the cost was my family's carefully maintained facade shattering into pieces. My mother called that evening. Her voice was subdued, lacking its usual imperious tone. Will you come to dinner on Sunday, please? Just family, no agenda, no drama. We need to talk. I'll think about it, I said. Sunday arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. I almost didn't go, but something pulled me toward my parents' house. Some need for closure or understanding. When I arrived, the atmosphere was subdued. No champagne, no celebration, just the five of us around the kitchen table instead of the formal dining room. Laura looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled. James wasn't there. My mother had made pot roast comfort food instead of the elaborate meals she usually prepared. Thank you for coming, my mother said as we sat down. We ate in silence for several minutes before Laura finally spoke. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I'm sorry for lying, for letting everyone believe something that wasn't true, for treating you like you were less than me when you'd actually been the one helping me. Why did you do it? I asked. Why not just be honest? Because I couldn't bear to fail, she admitted. My whole life I've been the successful one, the achiever, the one who did everything right. When I couldn't afford Morrison Tower, I felt like I'd failed at being Laura, so I lied. And then I had to keep lying, and it spiraled. My father cleared his throat. We put too much pressure on you, on both of you. We created an environment where success was measured by narrow metrics. Law degrees, corporate positions, expensive real estate. We didn't value different kinds of achievement. You taught us that appearances mattered more than truth, I said. Laura learned that lesson well. We did, my mother acknowledged, tears forming in her eyes. And we're sorry, to both of you. The conversation stretched into the evening. We talked about expectations and disappointments, about the ways families can damage each other, even with good intentions. Laura admitted she'd been jealous of me for years of the freedom I had to pursue what I loved, while she felt trapped by expectations. I thought you had it easy, she confessed. No pressure, no demands. But you were building something real while I was building an illusion. It wasn't easy, I told her. Every family dinner, where you got praised while I got pitied, hurt. Every comparison, every dismissive comment about my choices, all of it hurt. But I kept going because I believed in what I was doing. Laura nodded, wiping her eyes. James and I are going to counseling, individual and couples. He feels betrayed, understandably. I don't know if we'll make it through this. What about the penthouse? I asked. We're moving out at the end of the month. We can't afford to keep renting it, and staying there knowing it's yours feels wrong now. She paused. Are you going to rent it to someone else? Probably. It's been a solid investment. A ghost of her old smile appeared. Of course it has. You always were smarter about money than me. I just hid it better. The evening ended without dramatic reconciliation or cheerful embraces, but there was an understanding, a foundation for something more honest than what we'd had before. My parents asked about my bookstores actually listening when I talked about upcoming author events and expansion plans. Laura asked questions about real estate investment, genuine curiosity, replacing her usual condescension. As I drove home, I realized that exposing the truth had been necessary, even if it had been painful. The perfect family image my parents had cultivated had been poisonous, breeding resentment and deception. Maybe without it, we could build something real. 3 months later, Laura and James separated officially. She moved into a modest apartment in Riverside, ironically, just a few blocks from my loft. We started meeting for coffee, occasionally awkward at first, but gradually more comfortable. She'd left her high-pressure firm and taken a position with better hours and less stress. She seemed smaller somehow, but also more genuine. My parents invited me to dinner monthly casual meals, where we talked about real things instead of performing for each other. My father asked my advice on investments. My mother started visiting my bookstores, actually reading the books I recommended. The Penthouse in Morrison Tower was rented to a young couple who worked in tech. They paid on time and took good care of the place. I sometimes drove past the building at night, looking up at the lit windows, reminded of the dinner where everything changed. My life didn't look different from the outside. Same loft, same bookstores, same quiet neighborhood, but internally everything had shifted. I no longer carried the weight of being the disappointment. I no longer measured my worth against my sister's achievements. I'd spoken my truth, and while it had shattered illusions, it had also freed us all from living lies. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about impressing others or maintaining appearances. It was about building something real, something solid, something that could weather the truth being told. My bookstores were that. My properties were that. And now slowly my family relationships were becoming that too. The story could have ended with vindication and isolation. Instead, it became about reconstruction. The table had fallen silent that night at the Grand Oak, but eventually we'd learned to fill the silence with honest words instead of champagne toasts to false achievements. And that, I discovered, was worth more than any penthouse. I caught my parents on my security camera planning to move my sister into my house while I was on a trip. Once everything is here, she won't make a scene. She'll just accept it, Mom said. So I set a trap for them and enjoyed. The notification pinged on my phone at 2:47 p.m. Tokyo time. I was sitting in a cafe near Shibuya Crossing, reviewing notes for tomorrow's presentation when I saw the motion alert from my front door camera. My house was supposed to be empty for the next 10 days, while I attended this technology conference in Japan. I opened the app, expecting to see a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor checking on things. Instead, I watched my mother unlock my front door with a spare key I'd given her for emergencies. Behind her stood my father, carrying what looked like luggage. Then came Brooke, my older sister, hauling 2 large suitcases. My stomach dropped as I fumbled to turn up the volume on my phone. "This will work perfectly," Mom said, glancing around my living room with satisfaction. "The guest room is already furnished, and Brooke can use the office space for her crafting supplies." "Are you sure Crystal won't mind?" Brooke asked, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care about the answer. "She'll understand," Dad replied, setting down a box near the stairs. "Family helps family. Besides, once everything is here, she won't make a scene. She'll just accept it." I sat frozen in that Tokyo cafe, watching my parents and sister systematically begin moving Brooke into my house without my knowledge or permission. Box after box came through my front door. Furniture appeared. I watched them rearrange my guest room, push my desk aside in the office, and fill my refrigerator with groceries. "This is so much better than that apartment complex," Brooke said, stretching out on my couch. I can't believe the landlord wouldn't renew my lease just because I was late on rent a few times. "A few times," Dad muttered, but Mom shot him a look. "What matters now is that Brooke has somewhere safe to stay," Mom said firmly. "Crystal has this whole house to herself anyway. 3 bedrooms for one person is excessive." I had purchased this house 2 years ago, after saving for nearly a decade. Every mortgage payment came from my salary as a software engineer. I'd chosen this specific neighborhood because it was quiet, close to hiking trails, and far enough from my family's drama to give me peace. That peace was apparently over. I scrolled back through my camera history. They'd been here yesterday too, while I thought they were checking on the house like they promised. Instead, they'd been measuring rooms and planning this invasion. I found footage from 3 days ago where Mom and Brooke walked through with a notepad pointing at different spaces and discussing furniture arrangements. They'd been scheming this for at least a week, timing it perfectly with my trip abroad. My hands shook as I called my best friend Taylor. There, what Taylor's voice rose an octave. "Moving Brooke into my house right now. I'm watching it happen on my security cameras." "That's insane. That's literally breaking and entering." "They have a key," I said bitterly. "I gave Mom one for emergencies." This isn't an emergency. This is a hostile takeover. Taylor paused. Wait, don't they know you have cameras? Apparently not. I installed them after that break-in scare in the neighborhood 6 months ago. Mom hasn't been by since then, so she wouldn't have noticed them. What are you going to do? I watched Mom hang pictures of Brooke's kids in my hallway covering the artwork I carefully selected. I'm going to let them finish. What? Let them move everything in. Let them get comfortable. Then I'm going to handle this properly. A plan was forming in my mind, cold and clear. Can you do me a favor? Over the next hour, I sat in that cafe watching the invasion continue. My conference presentation was tomorrow morning, but I couldn't focus on anything except the violation happening thousands of miles away. Brooke walked through my kitchen opening cabinets, rearranging my dishes to make room for hers. She tossed some of my pantry items into a garbage bag without even checking expiration dates. I never liked her taste anyway, Brooke said to Mom, holding up one of my decorative bowls. This can go to Goodwill. That bowl was handmade pottery I bought during a trip to Santa Fe 3 years ago. It cost me $200 and I carried it carefully in my lap on the plane ride home because I loved the turquoise glaze. I took screenshots of everything. Every moment, every room, every violation. My cloud storage was filling up rapidly, but I didn't care. This was documentation. Evidence of their complete disregard for my property and my autonomy. Dad returned with another truckload, this time bringing Brooke's kids with him. The children ran through my house with muddy shoes, tracking dirt across the area rugs in my living room and hallway. Nobody stopped them. Nobody asked them to take off their shoes, like I always did with visitors. Grandpa, can we play in the backyard? The 10-year-old asked. Of course. This is your new home, Dad announced cheerfully. Their new home. My stomach turned. They were already telling the children this was permanent, setting expectations that I'd have to shatter. Those kids didn't choose this situation, but they'd be caught in the aftermath of their mother's entitlement and my parents' enabling. I called Taylor back. I need you to do something specific for me. Name it. Go to my house tomorrow evening. Not inside. Just drive by and take photos of all the cars in the driveway. I want documentation of who's there and when. You're building a case. I'm protecting myself. I paused, watching Brooke's daughter jump on my couch with shoes still on. Can you also contact that lawyer friend of yours, the one who handled your landlord dispute last year? Patricia Warner. She's sharp, but she doesn't mess around. Perfect. That's exactly what I need. After we hung up, I forced myself to go back to the hotel and prepare for tomorrow's presentation. But sleep wouldn't come. I kept checking the cameras every 20 minutes, watching strangers live in my space. Brooke ate dinner at my kitchen table, served on my dishes. The kids watched television in my living room, arguing over the remote. Mom and Dad stayed until almost midnight, helping arrange furniture and unpack boxes. Crystal always keeps the guest towels in the hallway closet, Mom told Brooke, directing her around my house like she owned it. The presumption was staggering. Mom had been to my house maybe 5 times in 2 years, always brief visits for holidays or my birthday. She acted like she knew every corner of my home, every habit, every preference. She didn't. She knew the version of me that existed in her imagination, the compliant daughter who would sacrifice anything for family harmony. That daughter had died somewhere between watching them plot this invasion and watching them execute it. My presentation the next morning was a disaster. I stumbled through slides, lost my train of thought twice, and fielded questions poorly. My colleague from the Denver office, James, pulled me aside afterward. Are you okay? That wasn't like you at all. Family emergency, I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. Do you need to fly home early? I'm handling it. I managed a weak smile. Just a stressful situation. That evening in Tokyo, which was morning in Denver, I watched Dad bring over a dresser that clearly belonged to Brooke. They carried it upstairs to my guest room, huffing and complaining about the weight. Mom directed them to place it against the west wall, covering the outlet I used for my reading lamp when I stayed in that room myself. Brooke's son discovered my bookshelf in the living room, pulling volumes down and leaving them scattered on the floor. Nobody corrected him. Nobody taught him to respect other people's belongings. The parenting I witnessed over the cameras was chaotic at best, neglectful at worst. These children had no structure, no boundaries, no consequences for their actions, just like their mother. I documented everything with timestamps. The muddy footprints appeared at 4:37 p.m. The broken picture frame happened at 5:12 p.m. when Brooke's daughter knocked it off the mantel while dancing. The scratch on my hardwood floor occurred at 6:45 p.m., when they dragged the dresser across it instead of lifting properly. Taylor sent me photos from her drive-by. 3 cars in my driveway, lights on in every room. My once peaceful home transformed into what looked like a busy family residence. She texted, "This is wild. I can see kids' bikes on your front porch." Those bikes would scratch the wood. I'd refinished that porch myself last summer, spending an entire weekend sanding and staining to get it perfect. I responded, "Did you reach Patricia?" "Yes, she wants to talk to you ASAP. I gave her your number." Patricia called within the hour. I explained the situation while she listened with occasional sounds of disbelief. "Do you have documentation of all this?" she asked. "Hours of video footage, timestamps, screenshots, everything." "Good. Don't delete anything. Don't mention the cameras to anyone in your family." Her tone turned calculating. "Here's what we're going to do." She laid out a strategy that was both elegant and devastating. We'd let them get fully settled, let them believe their plan had worked. Then we'd execute a complete removal with legal backing law enforcement present and no room for argument or negotiation. The key, Patricia explained, is that they used your emergency access without permission for a non-emergency purpose. That's unlawful entry in Colorado. Add the fact that you have them on camera discussing how they plan to present you with a fait accompli, and we have clear evidence of intent. What about my parents? Can they get in actual legal trouble? Potentially, yes. But I'm guessing you don't want to press charges against your parents. I don't. I just want them out of my house and to understand boundaries. Then we'll use the threat of legal consequences as leverage. Most people become very cooperative when they realize how serious the situation is. We talked for 90 minutes going over every detail, every possibility, every contingency. Patricia was thorough to the point of intimidating. By the end, I felt like I had an actual battle plan instead of just rage and violation. The remaining days in Tokyo crawled by. I attended sessions and networking events on autopilot, my mind always half focused on what was happening at home. I watched Brooke settle in completely. She found my spare office supplies and set up a crafting area in what used to be my workspace. She discovered my collection of fancy teas and went through them without asking. She wore my bathrobe, the plush one I bought as a treat for myself after a particularly difficult project at work. That bathrobe cost me $120. Watching her wear it made my skin crawl. Mom visited daily, often bringing groceries and cooking meals in my kitchen. She reorganized my spice rack, threw away items she deemed unnecessary, and rearranged my pots and pans. Dad came by to fix things that weren't broken, adjusting my thermostat and claiming I had it set wrong, moving furniture to layouts he preferred. They were remaking my house in their image, erasing me piece by piece. On the 4th day, I watched a moment that crystallized everything. Brooke was on the phone with someone, probably a friend, giving them a tour over video chat. "Yeah, this is the living room," she said, panning her phone around. "My sister's place, but she's never here anyway. Works all the time." This house was just sitting empty, so Mom thought it made sense for us to use it. Just sitting empty, like a vacation home or an investment property. Not the place I came home to every night, the sanctuary I'd worked for years to afford. "The kids love having a backyard," Brooke continued. "Our apartment complex didn't have one. This is so much better for them. I'm even looking into getting them transferred to the school near here for after winter break." Better for them, not better for me. I took a screenshot of Brooke's face during that phone call, her expression relaxed and entitled, "Completely comfortable in my space." That image would stay with me for a long time. Taylor kept me updated from her end. She drove by twice more, documenting the ongoing occupation. Neighbors had apparently asked her if I'd rented out my house, confused by all the activity and unfamiliar cars. The Homeowners Association had even emailed me, asking about the change in occupancy, which I saw in my inbox, and ignored for now, planning to address it after the situation was resolved. "Your neighbors think you've moved out," Taylor told me. "Mrs. Chen from next door asked if you were okay." Mrs. Chen was a sweet retired teacher who brought me homemade dumplings sometimes. The thought of her worrying about me while my family colonized my house made everything worse. 3 days later, I was supposed to return home. Instead, I had Taylor post vacation photos on my social media pictures from a secondary location that made it look like I had extended my trip. Meanwhile, I flew back to Denver a week early, staying at Taylor's apartment. During that week, I watched my cameras religiously. Brooke had indeed moved in completely. She had taken over the master bathroom, filled my kitchen with her cooking equipment, and converted my home office into what she called her creative studio. Her two kids, ages 8 and 10, ran through my house like it was a playground, leaving toys everywhere. Mom and Dad visited daily, bringing more of Brooke's belongings. I watched them pack my personal items into boxes and stack them in the garage. Photos of my travels came down, replaced with Brooke's family portraits. My carefully organized kitchen became chaos. Crystal will come around, Mom told Brooke one evening, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my expensive coffee. She's always been dramatic about boundaries, but she's not cruel. When she sees how much the kids love it here, she'll realize this is the right thing. And if she doesn't, Brooke asked. Then we'll remind her about when we helped her with college expenses, Dad said. Family debt goes both ways. That comment made my blood boil. They'd given me $2,000 for textbooks my freshman year, which I'd paid back within 6 months. They'd held that small loan over my head for a decade, like they'd funded my entire education. The reality was that I'd worked 3 jobs during college. I waitressed on weekends, tutored other students during the week, and did freelance web design whenever I could find clients. I graduated with minimal debt because I'd sacrificed sleep, social life, and sometimes meals to pay my own way. That $2,000 represented less than 3% of my total college costs, yet they spoke about it like they'd put me through Harvard. During my surveillance week, I witnessed moments that would have been funny if they weren't happening in my house. Brooke tried to use my espresso machine and broke the steam wand within 10 minutes. She didn't tell anyone, just shoved the machine to the back of the counter and hoped I wouldn't notice. That machine cost me $800 and took me 3 months to learn to use properly. I documented the damage with screenshots and timestamps. 7:23 a.m. Espresso machine broken. Her 8-year-old son found my collection of vinyl records, rare editions I'd been collecting since college. He pulled them out of their sleeves with sticky fingers, left them scattered on the floor, and stepped on one while chasing his sister through the living room. The crack was audible through the camera's audio feed. 8:47 a.m. Vintage Beatles album destroyed. Value approximately $300. Brooke's 10-year-old daughter discovered my jewelry box in the master bedroom. I watched her try on my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one item of real value I owned that held emotional significance. She paraded around in it for 20 minutes before Brooke noticed and told her to put it back, but she didn't supervise the return. I saw the girl toss it carelessly back into the box, tangling it with cheaper costume jewelry. 2:15 p.m. Family heirloom mishandled. Potential damage to pearls. I made notes of everything in a detailed spreadsheet. Item time, nature of damage or violation, estimated value if applicable. Patricia had told me to document like I was preparing for court, because we might be. Taylor came over to her apartment each evening, and we'd watch together like the world's most infuriating reality show. She'd bring dinner and wine, and we'd sit on her couch with my laptop monitoring my house in real time. "Your sister just used your expensive French sea salt for pasta water," Taylor observed one night. "Of course she did." I rubbed my temples. "That's $30 for 8 ounces. It's meant for finishing dishes, not boiling water." Does she strike you as someone who knows the difference? Brooke doesn't know the difference between a lot of things like boundaries and invasion, or borrowing and stealing. The cameras captured conversations that revealed just how entitled my sister had become. One afternoon, her friend came over for coffee, and they sat in my living room gossiping. "This house is amazing," the friend said. "How do you afford it?" "It's my sister's, but she's barely ever here. She's married to her job. No boyfriend, no life outside work. Mom says it's sad really having all this space for nothing. But she's letting you stay." "Well, Mom arranged it. Crystal's off traveling for work all the time anyway. What does she need 3 bedrooms for?" The friend looked uncomfortable. "Did she say you could move in?" "She'll be fine with it. Mom says she's just dramatic about stuff at first, but she always comes around. Family is family." The friend changed the subject quickly, clearly sensing something off about the arrangement. But Brooke remained oblivious, confident in her narrative that I'd eventually accept this because that's what I'd always done before. She wasn't entirely wrong. Throughout our childhood and adulthood, I had been the one to compromise. When we shared a room growing up, I gave up my side of the wall space for her posters. When we fought over the family car in high school, I took the bus so she could drive. When she needed money for her wedding, I contributed $500, which I couldn't really afford at the time because that's what sisters do. I'd spent 35 years being the accommodating one, the peacekeeper, the person who absorbed conflict to keep everyone else comfortable. My parents had come to expect it. Brooke had come to demand it. This time would be different. Patricia and I met in person the day after I returned to Denver. Her office was downtown, all glass and steel with a view of the mountains. She was in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. "I've reviewed all your footage," she said, pulling up files on her computer. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of unlawful occupancy I've seen. Your family wasn't subtle. They didn't think they needed to be. They assumed I'd fold. Have you folded before?" "Every time." I met her gaze. "I'm done folding." She smiled, the expression somewhere between approval and anticipation. "Good. Let's discuss strategy in detail." We spent 3 hours going over every aspect of the plan. Patricia explained Colorado law regarding unlawful entry, trespassing, and property rights. She outlined how the police civil standby would work, what paperwork I'd need, and what to expect from my family's reactions. "They'll try to make you feel guilty," she warned. "They'll cry, they'll yell, they'll invoke family loyalty. You need to be prepared to stand firm regardless of their emotional manipulation." I can do that. I thought about watching them dismantle my home piece by piece. I'm angry enough to do that. Good. Anger is useful if you channel it correctly. She pulled out a document. "Now about damages. I calculated based on your documentation. We're looking at a minimum of $4,200, possibly more, depending on what else we find during the inspection." The number shocked me. I knew they'd done damage, but seeing it quantified made it real. Patricia continued. "That's the espresso machine, the vinyl record area rug, cleaning for the muddy footprints, hardwood floor repair, where they dragged furniture, the broken picture frame, various household items they've used or damaged, and professional cleaning services after they leave. We're not including your grandmother's necklace because the damage there isn't quantifiable yet, but we noted it in the violation list." "Will they actually pay?" "If they don't, can we file in small claims court? With your video evidence, it's an open and shut case. Most people prefer to pay quietly, rather than have this aired in public court proceedings." I also met with Tom from Superior Locksmith during this time. He came to Taylor's apartment with catalogs and equipment samples explaining various security upgrades. "What you want," he said, "is a system where you control everything remotely. New smart locks, upgraded cameras with facial recognition sensors on every entry point. If someone tries to access your house without authorization, you'll know immediately." "How soon can you install it?" "Day of. If you want, I can have a crew standing by. As soon as the current occupants are removed, we go in and lock it down tight." The cost was substantial, nearly $3,000 for everything. But after watching my family violate my home for weeks, it felt like money well spent. I also contacted my insurance company, explaining the situation carefully. The agent was sympathetic but clear about limitations. "Damage caused by family members with authorized access is tricky," she explained. "Since you gave your mother a key, it complicates things. But if they're removed and then try to access the property again, that's definite trespassing, and we can help. So I'm on my own for the current damage." "For the most part, yes, but document everything anyway. If this escalates, you'll want that paper trail." Another call went to my mortgage company. I explained that there were unauthorized occupants in my property and I wanted additional security measures on my account. "We'll flag your file," the representative said. "Nobody can get information or make changes without answering specific security questions only you would know." I changed those security questions to things my family couldn't possibly guess. No more mother's maiden name or city where you were born. Instead, I used random answers I stored in a secure password manager. Every evening at Taylor's apartment, I watched my house and waited. Brooke had settled into a routine. She'd wake around 9, make coffee with my expensive beans, and spend mornings on her laptop supposedly job hunting. Afternoons involved picking up the kids from the school she'd enrolled them in 3 miles from my house. Evenings were dinner, television, and the kids running wild until bedtime around 10. My parents came by almost daily, often staying for dinner. Mom would cook in my kitchen using my pots and pans, serving food on my dishes. They'd sit around my table like it was their own family home, talking and laughing, while I watched from across the city, invisible and violated. One particularly glaring evening, Dad noticed a drip under my kitchen sink. Instead of letting me know so I could arrange a plumber, he decided to fix it himself. I watched him take apart the pipes with my tools from the garage, making the leak worse. Water spread across my kitchen floor while he cursed and fumbled with wrenches. Mom called Brooke over. "Do you have Crystal's plumber's number?" "No. Why would I?" "Your father's made the sink worse. We need someone to fix it before it damages the floor." Brooke shrugged. "Just call someone from the internet. We can pay them back when Crystal gets home." They called a random plumbing service that charged them $300 for an emergency weekend visit. The plumber fixed what Dad had broken, and nobody seemed to recognize the irony. They created a problem through their own incompetence, then spent my potential money to fix it. I added it to the spreadsheet. 6:47 p.m. Plumbing damage caused by unauthorized repairs. Emergency plumber fee, $300. Taylor shook her head, watching it unfold. "Your family is something else. They're used to me fixing their problems. They've probably forgotten I'm a person with my own needs and boundaries." "Are you nervous about confronting them?" "Terrified," I admitted, but more terrified of what happens if I don't. If I let this go, I'll never get my life back. The week crawled toward Friday, my supposed return date. I spent hours preparing, mentally rehearsing what I'd say, imagining every possible response. Patricia had coached me on staying calm, speaking firmly, and not engaging with emotional manipulation. Remember, she'd said in our final planning meeting, "You are the homeowner. You are the victim of their trespass. You have every right to remove them, and you're being generous by giving them time to pack, rather than having their belongings placed on the curb. Don't let them flip the script and make you the villain." Thursday night, I barely slept. I lay in Taylor's guest room, staring at the ceiling, running through tomorrow's plan. Part of me wanted to call it off to just let them stay to avoid the confrontation and the family explosion that would follow. But then I'd remember Brooke laughing on the phone about how I was never there anyway, and Mom saying I'd just accept it, and Dad talking about holding a decade-old $2,000 loan over my head. I'd remember watching them pack away my belongings like I was moving out of my own house. I'd remember my grandmother's pearls being tossed carelessly into a jewelry box by a child who'd never even been told they were important. No, this was happening. Tomorrow I would take back my home and my dignity. Friday morning arrived with painful slowness. I met Patricia, Tom, and Officer Mills at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my house at 2:30 p.m. We reviewed the plan one final time. Taylor arrived with a moving truck, ready to help haul boxes if needed. "Everyone clear on their role?" Patricia asked. We all nodded. "Then let's do this." On the day I was supposed to return, I did return, but not alone. I arrived at my house at 3:00 p.m. with Patricia the locksmith and a police officer I'd requested for civil standby. Taylor followed in a moving truck I'd rented. I rang my own doorbell. Brooke answered, holding a glass of my wine. Her smile faltered when she saw the group behind me. "Crystal, you're back early. Mom said you wouldn't be home until tonight." "I live here," I said evenly. "May I come into my house?" "Of course, come in." She stepped aside with forced cheer. "The kids are at the park with Dad, but Mom's in the kitchen." I walked into my transformed home. My mother appeared from the kitchen, her expression shifting rapidly, from surprise to guilt to defiance. "Crystal, sweetheart, we need to talk." "We do," I agreed. "This is my attorney, Patricia Warner, Officer Mills, and Tom from Superior Locksmith. We're here to address the unauthorized occupancy of my property." The color drained from Mom's face. "Unauthorized." "Don't be ridiculous. We're family." Patricia stepped forward with a folder. "Mrs. Brennan, your daughter has documented evidence that you used an emergency key to move your other daughter into this property without the homeowner's knowledge or consent while she was abroad. This constitutes illegal entry and trespassing." Trespassing? Brooke's voice went shrill. "Mom said Crystal agreed to this." "I never agreed to anything I said," pulling out my phone. "I've been watching everything from Japan. Want to see the footage of Mom saying once everything is here, she won't make a scene?" Mom's face went white. "You were spying on us." "I was monitoring my own home, which is completely legal." I turned to Patricia. "Show them." Patricia laid out printed screenshots, timestamps, and a formal notice. "Miss Brennan is within her legal rights to have you removed from the premises immediately. However, she has chosen to handle this somewhat more graciously than the law requires. You have until 6:00 p.m. today to remove all belongings that do not belong to the homeowner. Anything remaining after that time will be considered abandoned property." 3 hours, Brooke shrieked. "We can't move everything in 3 hours." You moved it all in over 3 days while I was gone, I said coldly. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Dad can help, and Mom seems quite good at organizing these things. Crystal, please, Mom's voice cracked. Brooke has nowhere to go. She lost her apartment because she didn't pay rent. That's not my emergency. I looked at my sister, who was scrolling frantically on her phone, probably calling Dad. You're 38 years old, Brooke. You have 2 kids and no stable housing because you make bad decisions and expect everyone else to fix them. How can you be so heartless, Mom demanded, after everything we've done for you? You mean the $2,000 from 2015 that I paid back? I pulled out my phone again. I have the canceled check. Would you like to see it? Officer Mills cleared his throat. Ladies, I'm here to ensure this remains civil. Miss Brennan has made her position clear. I suggest you start gathering your belongings. Dad arrived 20 minutes later with the kids, his confusion quickly turning to anger as he understood the situation. You're really going to throw your sister and her children out. I'm removing people who broke into my house and moved in without permission, I corrected. Where Brooke goes next is her choice, not my responsibility. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't scheme and lie. I gestured around at my altered home. You packed my belongings into boxes in my own garage. You removed my pictures from the walls. You've been feeding your grandchildren with my food and using my utilities without contributing a cent. The next 3 hours were chaos. Brooke called everyone in the family, painting me as a villain. My phone exploded with texts from cousins and aunts demanding to know how I could do this. I blocked them all. Dad made multiple trips with his truck. Mom cried, arguing that I was tearing the family apart. Brooke's kids cried, confused about why they had to leave the new house. I felt terrible for them, but their mother's poor planning wasn't something I could fix by surrendering my home. At 5:45 p.m., they loaded the last box. My house looked like a hurricane had passed through. Furniture was scratched. Walls had new holes from removed picture hooks, and my hardwood floors showed damage from heavy items being dragged across them. Patricia documented everything with photos. We'll include this in the demand letter for damages. Damages. Brooke whirled around. You're going to sue me. You damaged my property, I said simply. That has financial consequences. Where are we supposed to go? Brooke's mascara streaked her face. It's almost 6. Mom and Dad have a 4-bedroom house with a finished basement. I'm sure they'll accommodate you since they think families should sacrifice for each other. I looked at my mother. Unless that sentiment only applies to me. Mom's expression turned bitter. You've become cruel, Crystal. I've become someone who enforces boundaries. There's a difference. I held out my hand. The key, please. She dropped the emergency key into my palm like it burned her. The 3 of them left. Dad's truck overloaded. Mom crying in the passenger seat. Brooke following in her car with the kids. Officer Mills tipped his hat. That was handled well, all things considered. After they left, Tom, the locksmith, changed every lock in the house and upgraded my security system. New cameras, new sensors, new codes that only I knew. Taylor helped me move the boxes from the garage back inside, and we spent hours putting my home back together. Your family is going to hate you for a while, Taylor said around midnight as we reassembled my bookshelf. They already don't respect me. I'd rather have their anger than their entitlement. The next few days brought a tsunami of family drama. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years called to lecture me. Brooke posted on social media about heartless siblings who value houses over people. Mom sent me Bible verses about forgiveness and charity. I responded to none of it. Instead, Patricia sent formal demand letters. The property damage came to $4,200 professionally estimated. The unauthorized use of utilities during the week they'd stayed there added another $600. We included timeline documentation, video evidence, and a detailed breakdown. Dad called that evening, his voice tight. A lawyer letter. Crystal, really? You damaged my property. I'm entitled to compensation. We're not paying this. Then we'll file in small claims court, and all that footage of you illegally moving Brooke in will become part of the public record. Your choice. He hung up. 2 weeks later, I received a check for $4,800 with no note attached. The family rift deepened. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation to my parents' house. My phone stayed silent on Christmas. Brooke blocked me on all social media. Several cousins unfriended me. What hurt was discovering who actually understood my position. My Aunt Lauren, Mom's younger sister, called me in January. Your mother won't talk about what really happened, Lauren said. but I know enough to know you set boundaries, and I'm proud of you. I've watched her bulldoze you your whole life. Everyone thinks I'm terrible. Everyone doesn't know the truth, and the people who matter do." She paused. "For what it's worth, Brooke is driving your parents crazy. She treats their house like a hotel, and the kids have destroyed your mother's garden." I felt a petty satisfaction at that, but kept it to myself. By spring, the narrative had started shifting. Brooke had apparently demanded money from several relatives for a new apartment, then spent it on other things and stayed at my parents' house. She'd borrowed Dad's truck and returned it damaged. She'd asked Mom to babysit constantly while she went out with friends. The same family members who had condemned me started asking careful questions about what had actually happened. I sent them screenshots of the security footage. No commentary needed. My Uncle Dennis called to apologize. "I didn't realize they'd literally broken in and moved her stuff while you were overseas. Your mother made it sound like you'd agreed and then changed your mind." More apologies trickled in. Not from everyone, but from enough people that I felt vindicated. Mom reached out in June with a short text. "We need to talk." I agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop. She looked older, tired. The righteous anger from months ago had been replaced with something deflated. "Brooke moved out," she said without preamble. "Got an apartment with some boyfriend we've never met. Left us with damage and unpaid bills." "I'm sorry that happened." "Are you?" Her voice held challenge. "I'm sorry you're experiencing the consequences of enabling her poor choices. I'm not sorry I protected myself from being her next victim." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "You really see it that way? That we were trying to victimize you? You used a key meant for emergencies to move someone into my house without my knowledge while I was on another continent. You planned it deliberately, timing it with my absence. You packed my belongings away and told Brooke I'd just accept it rather than make a scene." I kept my voice level. "What would you call that?" She had no answer. "I need you to understand something." I continued. "I love you. I love Dad. I even love Brooke, though I don't like her very much right now. But love doesn't mean allowing people to walk all over me. It doesn't mean sacrificing my stability for someone who won't stabilize herself." She's struggling. She's 38 with 2 kids. At some point, struggling becomes a choice. I softened slightly. "You did her no favors by always fixing her problems. You taught her that someone will always save her from her own decisions." Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "Your father and I talked about selling the house. The stress with Brooke, the money we've spent, it's too much. What does Dad say about what happened with my house?" She looked away. "He says we were wrong. He said at the night you had us removed. Actually, he was angry with you in the moment, but later he told me we'd crossed the line. And you, I thought I was solving a problem. I thought you'd be upset initially but would come around." She met my eyes. "I was wrong. I violated your trust and your space. I'm sorry." It was the first real apology I'd received. I let it sit between us for a moment. "Thank you for saying that. Does this mean we can fix things?" "Eventually, maybe, but not today." I stood to leave. "I need you to respect that I'm not the family's backup plan anymore. I'm not the one who sacrifices so everyone else stays comfortable. If you can accept that, we can rebuild. If not, we're better off apart." She nodded slowly, and I left her sitting there. Dad reached out separately a month later. We met for breakfast, awkward and stilted. He apologized more directly than Mom had, admitted they'd been wrong, and asked what he could do to make things right. "Time," I told him, "and respect. I need time, and I need you to respect my boundaries going forward." Fair enough. We met monthly after that, slowly rebuilding something that resembled a relationship. Mom joined eventually, careful and subdued in ways she'd never been before. They asked about my life, my work, my plans. They didn't mention Brooke unless I asked first. Brooke herself remained radio silent until my birthday in October, when she sent a text. "Happy birthday. I'm sorry for everything." I wrote back, "Thank you, Elsa. I hope things are going better for you." She didn't respond, and I didn't push. My house, meanwhile, became truly mine again. I repainted the rooms that had been altered, replaced the damaged flooring, and created the spaces I wanted. My home office remained an office, not a craft room. My walls held my artwork and my photos. Every choice was mine alone. Taylor came over regularly, and I hosted dinners for the friends who'd supported me through everything. I dated briefly, nothing serious, but enjoyed the freedom of bringing someone home without worrying about family drama. The following Thanksgiving, I hosted my own dinner. Small, intimate, just Taylor, Aunt Lauren, Uncle Dennis, and 2 colleagues from work who didn't have local family. We ate well, laughed often, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Completely at peace in my own space. Mom texted wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. I responded, thank you. Same to you. It wasn't warm, but it was honest. We were building something new, something based on mutual respect rather than assumed obligation. Christmas brought a card from my parents with a gift card inside, no strings attached. I sent one back. Brooke's name didn't appear in our conversations, and I didn't ask. By the time spring rolled around again, a full year since the coffee shop conversation with Mom, I felt ready to invite them to dinner. Just them in my home on my terms. They arrived nervous, bearing wine and apologies in their posture. We ate the meal. I'd cooked, talked carefully about safe topics, and when Mom asked to see what I'd done with the office, I showed her proudly. It looks wonderful, she said quietly. I'm glad you have this space the way you want it. Me too. As they left that evening, Dad hugged me tightly. I missed you, he said. I missed you too. The relationship we have now isn't what it was before, but it's healthier. There are boundaries clearly drawn and respected. They don't ask for favors beyond normal parent-child things, and I don't volunteer myself as the family solution service. I heard through Aunt Lauren that Brooke is doing somewhat better. She kept the boyfriend's apartment, got a steady job, and her kids are stable. She hasn't reached out beyond that one birthday text, and I haven't pushed contact. Maybe someday we'll have a relationship again, or maybe we won't. Either way, I've learned that protecting yourself isn't cruelty, even when people call it that. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal, even when family claims you're tearing them apart. My security cameras still run quietly recording, though now they only ever catch me coming home to my sanctuary. Every time I unlock my door, I feel grateful for that week in Tokyo when I discovered what was happening and chose to handle it on my own terms. Some people called me heartless. Some said I was justified. In the end, what mattered was that I refused to let anyone, even family, bulldoze through my life and claim it was for my own good. My house is mine. My boundaries are firm. And I sleep better at night knowing that nobody has a key except me.